We've learned some good things about networks so far. We have learned that we can categorize them by size. And so when we talk about networks, there are PANs, LANs, WANs, and MANs. And those are different ways we could categorize a network by how much geographic space does the network take up. And we've also learned that we could categorize networks by access. And so an intranet, an extranet, and a VPN are three different ways that networks are categorized by access. What we're going to start looking at now is how do we actually build and put a network together? And one of the first questions you got to think about is how are we going to connect our devices, right? So if a network is two or more devices connected together, how do we connect those two devices? Do we connect them with cables? Sorry, like this one? We connect the devices with cables, and that would be like a wired network. We're using wires. Or do we connect the devices wirelessly? If we're going to connect our devices with cables, right, or with wires, if we're going to connect our devices with wires, there's really three types of wires that we can use. And those three types are Ethernet, coaxial cable, and fiber optic. We're going to talk about Ethernet first. And Ethernet is sometimes also referred to as Cat5 or Cat6, right? And generally speaking, all the cabling I've ever done in my life has been Cat5. Cat6 is a newer standard. I'm not sure how widely adopted it is at this point. But here are pictures of a Ethernet Cat5 cable. Cat6 also looks like this. And it looks kind of like, you know, this little thing on the end here looks sort of like the thing on a phone jack, like that little guy right there. Except it's a little bit bigger than the plastic plug that you find on a phone jack. This one's actually called an RJ45. Where like, oh, you see it right there, RJ45 plug. Whereas on a phone jack, I think it's like RJ11. There it is, RJ11 versus RJ45. And Ethernet has 8 wires, whereas the phone just has, at least in this picture, 2. Just has 2 wires. And they're both twisted pair wires. And why do we call them twisted pair? Because if you look, if you open up this cable right here, this Ethernet, you'll actually find 4 twisted pairs inside. 4 twisted pairs inside. And so Ethernet cable is pretty easy. You can buy it, pretty easy to make, to put these little plugs on. You could buy the cable in bulk, and you could buy these little plugs, and you just get the little tool, and you have to kind of put it all together, and then you can make your own cabling. So that's Ethernet cabling. And that's one of the ways we can wire different devices together, and it's super widely used. Ethernet is super widely used. Here we go. We could buy a bulk 1,000 feet of cable for 130 bucks. 130 bucks. So 1,000 feet for $130. Another cable that's used is to connect computers and send device back and forth between different, send data back and forth between different devices. Is coaxial cable, and you can see how that's spelled right there, coaxial cable. And this is the exact same cable that's used for your cable television. And because this infrastructure is already in place, we send a lot of digital data over this hardware, this cabling, these wires. And so if you have cable internet service, this is how your internet service is coming in. Generally speaking, this type of wiring is not used like in the house or in an office to go from computer to computer to computer. This would simply be because this is how you're paying for your internet access. This is where you would use this, or where it's used in a lot of applications for connecting computers together. It's not really used for like, oh, I'm going to network 30 computers together in a classroom. In that case, you would use Ethernet. You wouldn't use coaxial. So coaxial is pretty much just data coming in for your cable connection for your internet. And then finally, we have fiber optic cable. And fiber optic cable sends pulses of light, and you can see the light shining out of the tips of these pieces of fiber optic cable. And the pulses of light is how we send the zeros and ones. And coaxial and Ethernet both send electricity, both run on electricity, but fiber optic runs on light. So the data is traveling at the speed of light when it's on fiber optic cable. And so fiber optic cable is used for transmitting large amounts of data really quickly. And because of that, it connects remote, distant locations, right? So running between large metropolitan cities, running between continents, we have a lot of fiber optic cable. As a matter of fact, if you go and you search for fiber optic cable world map, you could come to this link for the submarine cable map of all the cables that are under the marine surface, so submarine, not like submarine like you get in it and right under the water. But here's all the underwater connections around the world, and it's pretty amazing just to look at it. And most of these, I'd venture to say, are fiber optic, if not all of them, right? But you can see just sort of the world and how we've connected ourselves with cables, fiber optic cables all around the world to send data back and forth. There really aren't too many places that aren't connected. Argentina is not doing so good. Chile down here, not so much. All right, so that's a little bit about connecting networks, and one of the ways that we can connect devices together is a wired connection as opposed to wireless. And if we're going to do it with wired, we're going to use Ethernet, we're going to use coaxial cable, or we're going to use fiber optic. Fiber optic is great for connecting places that are distant and for sending large amounts of information quickly. Ethernet is pretty much the standard for networking devices together at locations. And coaxial cable is just what is used to bring internet service in if you have cable internet in your house. So those are three types of wires that are used for connecting devices when you're networking and connecting these devices together.